we're going to do something hot here. You have been involved all this other time from going in, making a save. How do they work that so you could still, they can still get what they need and still make you look good, but you're sitting there talking about it? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not sure.
So if they're doing saying they're getting heat on somebody in the ring, and
Right.
here you have been wrestling all this time, and you don't go out to make a save, you don't want to try to stop it. How did they transition you from, okay, he can't go jump in the ring to make the save?
Well, I don't know that was ever said, except no one expected that. I guess because you had the coat and tie on, you were an announcer. Now we worked that angle here in Knoxville, right? Mm-hmm. Don Curtis was our de facto commissioner.
Right.
And of course, I was doing the TV, and Nelson and I were feuding with Dutch and Foley. And Dutch would, but Curtis made a video. And now, when you're at that desk, when you're in a sport coat, you're not a wrestler, you're a commentator. You can't lay your hands on these people. Right. And of course, Dutch uses that to poke me, right? You'd love to hit me, wouldn't you? But you can't.
Love it.
And so we're building that heat, right?
Sure. So
yeah. So one time we did on the TV here, Don Carson and I came over the desk and we went into the ring and we worked an angle to go back to the house show. That's the only time. But see, that's the other thing that was so great about that era and is so bad about this one, is that we found something good. We'd use it more than once, but not twice in the same show or twice in the same week or even twice in the same damn 6 months, for Christ's sake.
Well, it's the same thing. You hit a person with a chair the first time, you get a pop, but the third or fourth, fifth time, it's kind of like, we've already seen
you know what I tell these young guys? I say, you remember the first time you saw your girlfriend naked? Oh, yeah. I said, do you remember the 300th time? Don't bother to answer. I know the answer because it's going to be the same for me as it is for you. No, you don't. And that's exactly why I keep saying, don't keep doing the same stuff over and over again. It's like, because it loses there's no pop left in it,
Sure. It's so true. Absolutely true. So now you've moved into, at this point, are you still wrestling some? Or are you 100% commentary now?
No,
doing the show?
I didn't quit wrestling actually until 1980. Completely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were still doing the TV show in Knoxville, but you were going to wrestle somewhere else.
Well, no, I'd wrestle in Knoxville too. See, Nelson, when I was doing a commentary, Nelson and I were wrestling on Friday night. He might wrestle on TV Saturday, but I was doing the television, right? Then he and I would wrestle somewhere, Saturday night as a team. And I was still wrestling for Crockett's as well, So
you had a full plate for no.
Talk about it. Well, and then on top of that, we started doing magazines. And then Briscoe's and I got T-shirts out in 1972, talking about jack of all trades and master of none.
So, as I have learned, that commentators or announcers, whoever you want to call them, are also personalities, and for me, very important to the show. Absolutely essential to have someone that knows what they're doing. In fact, a lot of time, the commentator can actually do the interview for the wrestler, especially if they're not very good at speaking. Sure. They can actually do it. Did you ever find yourself having to lead the wrestler through the interview constantly?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Not a lot, but if they run out of gas and you see 30 seconds on that clock, somebody's got to fill it, Or
if they forget the town, the date, or that kind of thing. Sure.
And then there was Lawler and Cornette, where you just held the microphone and said, "You're against so and so," and then
let them go. Let them go. And that goes through years and years of doing the interviews for sure.
Well, and let me say this about commentators too. Back during the Monday Night Wars, Terry Taylor sat in with Gordon or somebody on one of the shows, right? And he and I were in contact and talking back then. And he said, I've always had respect for you and the other guys doing commentary. He said, but after trying to do it myself, I got a lot more respect for you guys because you're improvising for an hour or two. You don't have a script. And to me, a good commentator is filling in the void or the blank,
Sure.
right? If the match is good, he can make it better. If it's bad, he can make it palatable.
And back then, if there was a dead spot, you can't be talking about, well, this Friday night coming up in the Knox Pacific Coliseum. You can't do that because the TV station would, raise bloody.
Well, you only had X number of minutes of commercial time.
Sure.
Well, like on our personality profiles, right? Ron used to call them the commercial without the non-commercial commercial, right?
Yes.
Let's say Joe LeDuc and Ron are having a lumberjack match, right? And I'm talking to one of the two of them on a personality profile. We can talk about lumberjack matches. We can talk about how difficult they are, how vicious they are, how many of you have been in. But we can't mention. But the minute I say Knoxville Friday night, it's all commercial.
It's all commercial. Exactly right.
Now there's more commercials than there are actually.
Exactly. Every time you turn around, well, coming up at so and so, or the next Friday or whatever, and back then you couldn't do that as a filler.
No.
You had to talk about what was going on in the ring or what's coming up later on in the show. But you mentioned a date or a town, TV station starts going ching ching. That's we'll get you a little charge for that. Something was done. Robert had done a personality profile in Georgia, and he did that, and TBS penalized the show for extra commercial time.
Is that right?
And they had to stop doing that. Yeah. So
you got to let us guys that know how to do that. Don't let the amateurs mess with it.
That's right. Well, somehow the date and the time got mentioned, and then TBS had to fit. And that was. Did you deal with TBS and that group? Did you have to deal with them?
Well, when I was down at doing the show with Gordon, during the war in Atlanta, I went down there. When the war started, I was down there part of 72 and 73 in Atlanta, and Jack Briscoe and Tim Woods bought in to the Atlanta operation. And Gordon was flying up every week to do their TV because Caporal had gone with Ann Gunkel.
Right. So just to clarify, the war is in Atlanta. This is 72?
72, 73.
And this is between All South Wrestling, which was Ann Gunkel, and Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was, like you were saying, Jack Briscoe, Tim Woods, Jim Barnett.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, so Jack calls me and he said, we would like to have you in Atlanta to help with the TV, work in the office, handle public relations, and do the weekly program, and so forth, so on. And it was a good offer, right? And okay, I mean, it wasn't that anything wrong in Charlotte, right? But it was just a chance to do something, different.
Sure.
Jimmy Crockett didn't want to let me go. So they're trying to figure this all out. So then I get a phone call from Eddie Graham, who was helping, Atlanta. And of course, he and I had a history and we knew each other. So he said, well, Jimmy doesn't want you to go do the TV in Atlanta. I said, I guess, I don't know why, but, I'm doing a good job for them, and I guess. But he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. You give your notice that you're coming to Tampa to wrestle. And on your way to Tampa, you drop your furniture and stuff off in Atlanta. Then you come to Tampa and wrestle for me for a few weeks. Then you go back to Atlanta and do what we wanted you to do all. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, I got a good relationship with the Crockett's. I don't want to screw that up. And I don't want to. Who do I tell no to, right at this point? But then Jack was still talking to Jimmy, and so Jimmy finally relented and said, "Okay, if Les wants to go and you want, it's all right. We'll work it out." So I went to Atlanta and worked in the office down there. And the deal was, now you mentioned earlier about the two commentators, right?
Right.
And that basically cost me my job in Atlanta. When I went down there, Leo was the booker, and the whole idea was he was going to work a deal with Bobby Shane and I, right, off the Atlanta TV and off all the other TVs, and bring me, put me in the ring. Well, I ended up winning the first ever 2-ring battle royal down there to kind of set this up, but this was before Barnett bought in. So anyway, everything's going well. I mean, we're doing the PR work, the magazines, the television going good. Gordon and I always got along and worked well together. So Barnett buys in. Well, that's where the name Thatcher came from. He gave me the name Thatcher in 62. My real last name is Malady, Malady. And hardly anybody ever pronounces Malady. It's Malady and Malady, about
That's
a
me.
million stupid, but it's never what it's supposed to be, right? And I'm used to that. So when I first went to work for wrestling for Barnett in 62, I was using my real name. And so I was, a couple months after I went to work there, I was at TV again in Indianapolis, and Les Ruffin came in and said, the old man's tired of everybody screwing up your last name. He wants to call you Les Thatcher. Is that all right? And hell, I don't care what you call me at this point. Just let me wrestle, right? That's what, call me Smith, Jones, I don't care. I said, just tell me how you spell it and I'm good, right? So I've been Les Thatcher ever since. So Barnett and I had, we had a history. But anyway, they were thinking about, Leo and Watts were thinking about letting Gordon stay in Atlanta, right? And they called me and we're sitting down, we're talking about this. And just phasing him out and letting me just handle the TV on my own. And I said, guys, let me run something by you. We're in Atlanta. There's 3 major sports franchises here: baseball, football, basketball. Each one of them has a broadcast team. Since I've been here, I realize part of what I'm doing in public relations is trying to get us on a level with those 3 sports, right? They all have broadcast teams. We have a broadcast team now. If Gordon goes back and stays in Tampa, we don't have a broadcast team. They said, you're right. If we're going to look like the other 3, then we got to do what the other 3 are doing. Okay, cool. They were up on it. Then Barnett bought in, right? And like I say, Jim and I always got the one thing about Barnett. You say what you want. He was always straight up with me. I mean, there's never a question of why he did something. He was honest about it. So after I went down there in 72. In 73, he called me in his office. Leslie, I gave you the name Thatcher. We go way back. And I said, yes, Jim. And I can't repeat it to you word for word, but I remember the conversation. He said, well, Leslie, I've got my townhouse and my chauffeur, and I've just got so many expenses here. And I want to buy into Tampa as well. So I've got to kiss Eddie's ass. And to do that, I need to leave Gordon here in Tampa, but I can't afford 2 commentators. So I've got to let you go. He said, now I've already talked to George Scott and Jimmy Crockett, and they would love to have you back in Charlotte if you would like to go, or you can go any place you want. I said, Charlotte's good for me. And so I cost myself the job. I guess although if he wanted to buy into Tampa, he might have brought Gordon back anyway and sent me packing, no matter what. But yeah, that's so I went back to Charlotte.
So you went from Charlotte, then you were going over working for Ron in Knoxville, getting him straight away over there.
Yeah, and then I moved over here to Charlotte, over here to Knoxville in November of 77, and full time.
And then in 1976, you were voted by the National Wrestling Alliance, Sam Muchnick, as the best new programming concepts for
Yes.
Southeastern Championship Wrestling. That was in 1976.
Right.
Tremendous accolade when you're being acknowledged by not just by every promoter in the NWA. Just tremendous accolade right there.
You know what? I was so proud of that show and what we did because, well, he said to me, build me a show. You got carte blanche, just as long as it's not crazy. So we did the personality profile, and everybody, the old timers are telling me you can't do that. Why? It's low key. You'll kill your momentum in the show and we'll never get it back. But Rodney, everything that I have initiated into wrestling in any way, shape, or form is something I have studied in another, business or another, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe that'll work in wrestling. And the personality profile goes back to 1966 in Atlanta. First TV, I wasn't wrestling. Leo says, we don't have you in any angles or anything. So is this drag racing thing? Is that a shoot or is that just, a work? I said, no, it's a shoot. You know anything about drag racing in Georgia? And I said, yeah, because a couple of the top guys in the National Hot Rod Association are Georgia guys and so forth, so on. Okay, I'm going to have Ed talk to you about drag racing as well as wrestling. So we did. And talking about, so I'm at Bell Auditorium the next Monday night. And this lady comes up to me, older lady, and she said, Mr. Thatcher, my grandson is with me tonight. He would like to meet you. I said, and get your autograph. I said, sure. So she went, I brought him up. So I signed his program. And so we're talking about, I said, do you come to the matches here at the Bell with your grandmother all the time? And before he could open his mouth, she said, it's the first time he's ever been here. I said, really? Oh, he watches every TV every Saturday with me. But he heard you talking about hot rods and he wanted to meet you. And
Wow.
It hit me. I sold a wrestling ticket, not because of wrestling, but because of my hobby, right? And then I got to thinking, NASCAR that's what it's all about, right? Rodney owns the same car so I'm a fan of that race driver. Why? Because we have a connection, right? And
Right.
then back then, in the NFL, they didn't have 4 ex-ball players analyzing every play, right, at halftime. So they, I forget which network it was on, but they were doing little human interest pieces like, here's this violent defensive lineman who makes pottery as a hobby. But to me, it's showing another side of him, right? And I'm thinking, we don't show the other side of wrestlers. All you see is this guy on camera, right? You don't know that he's got another life. Maybe he goes around hitting everybody he sees on the street, So anyway, that's how I came up with the idea for personality profile. And it worked, Red Bastine and I were, he rode with me one night from Charlotte to Fayetteville. And we're having this discussion all the way over and all the way back, right? Not arguing or anything, but Red said, I don't think it's going to work. No, it's going to work. So Dory Jr. was here with the title, and we had him on one of the profiles. And at the time, Red was helping book with Shires in Frisco. And so Red was out, or Dory had gone out there and in talking, had mentioned about our TV and about personality profile. So Bastine, or Dory called and said called Ron and said, Roy Shires and Bastine would like you to send a copy of profile. They'd like to see it. So Ron sent a copy out there. A couple of weeks later, my phone rings. It's Red Bastine. He said, I guess I owe you an apology. I said, for what? I know what you're talking about. The day of personality profile. I like it. I said, well, good. He said, do you mind if we use it? I said, Red, I'd be proud if you use it,
Wow.
But that's, I'm proud of those things. What we did with wrestling magazines, with Mid-Atlantic and the WWF was trend-setting at the time. Art themed covers, centerfolds, all color, et cetera, et cetera. None of that was being done,
Sure.
And so, yeah, But I always look at, I don't just out of the clear wake up and say, we're going to do this, right? It's a good idea. If I see it working someplace else and I try to, will it work in conjunction with wrestling? And so far, so good, Rodney. I'll screw up before it's over, I'm sure, but I haven't yet.
Well, at least you try. At least you try. The thing about it is that then you were basically picking out of other sports, like you were talking about the three other big sports,
Right.
the football, baseball. And so you're bringing some things that they had done in other sports into the wrestling, which
Sure.
I thought was absolutely perfect, and makes it still a sport. And as I've always said, the more that wrestling veer ways from being a sports more into entertainment, I think the worse it's going to get. Before it gets better, as far as I'm concerned.
Your daddy raised you right.
Well, he told me one night, and this is not about him, but he told me one night. I didn't watch the shows in latter years when he was. I didn't watch the shows. They grate on my nerves, so I don't watch all of them. I watched them here or there, and I was walking through to get me something out of the refrigerator, and he said, "You know what? I'm beginning to think I don't like this anymore." I said, well, I see. He said, it's just not.
No, it's not.
He said, I don't really know what this is, what I'm watching.
No, I don't know. I don't know either. I think I think your dad, when I went to Nashville and met him, he was just breaking into business in 1968, right?
Yes.
Because I remember, and the reason I remember he was just breaking in, because the way that some of the veterans, I didn't know him that well because I just gotten into territory, how they were screwing with him, right? Because they knew he was, quick story, Cora Combs, right?